How do we do our food plots? You know, I don't tell a lot of people that. It cost almost nothing. Just a little bit of work. You know, people will probably say that it won't work here, or I only have 10 acres, or I've got 100,000 acres. It doesn't matter. It works the same. I'll tell you this, if you try it, you'll like it. Whatever you do, don't tell anybody. Okay, so we're working on our food plots, quote unquote, down here in the bottom. And we try to do this on as much of the ranch as possible because of the benefits it has. And I'm calling it a food plot, but really this is just native land, native pasture. And we graze it with a really ultra high stock density. We mob graze it. We super duper intensive graze it. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's just basically as high a stock density as we can get on it for as short a period of time while maintaining or trying to maintain the condition on our cows that we need at that given time. And so there's a lot of adjustments because, as Ian Mitchell Ennis says, we're managing chaos. And so you're constantly adjusting a little bit. You're adjusting for the cow, you're adjusting for the weather, you're adjusting for the land and the terrain and how you have to build the fence and all that kind of stuff. We use the poly wire to do it. And so I've got a couple of different areas here that we've done different size pastures on, and we'll do different sizes throughout the entire process because of those adjustment things. So this first pasture is a half acre, and we had 317 cows on it. Of those cows, there's some that are developing heifers, so they're going to be smaller. So I don't know pounds of beef. You know, I could figure that up, but it doesn't really matter because it's all relative and it's all chaos, and everything is going to be slightly different. So we're just going to look at what it looks like when we're done and get an idea of maybe what you might want it to look like and why. So this is pasture number 1. As you can see, a lot of this stuff is tread on the ground or trampled on the ground. We had rain yesterday, and I'll show you the results of that in another pasture here in a minute. But this is kind of good. This is what I'd like to see. By getting this stuff down on the ground, you're feeding the microorganisms in the soil, you're covering the soil, so you're allowing it to hopefully retain more moisture. See, look at it. Look at all that moisture it's retained. We had an inch of rain last night, but anyway, that's what you're wanting to do long term. And so by having our cattle so tight in here, we think of it as maximum utilization. We want to either defecate on it, urinate on it, step on it, eat it, anything else that's going to impact it, that's going to cause it to gather more energy the next time we come through here, or gather more energy for the wildlife when they come in here. When somebody plants a food plot for deer specifically, The first thing that they a lot of times will tell them is, it's got to be a certain height. If it gets up to, 12 inches, whatever, you need to freshen it up. And, what do they tell them to do? They tell them they need to go get a mower and mow it to freshen it up. Well, we just basically did it on native pasture, which is what the deer are used to eating. Forbs, browse, all of that stuff, as much of the stuff as we could impact. And we did it for, I don't want to say free, because you got a little wire, you got a little labor, but it's good for the cattle, and it allows you to run more cattle, and it allows your cattle to do better, and you're just working with nature. It's how it was done years ago when the buffalo were passing through. But long term, what it does is it creates a environment that is advantageous for small regrowth, high nutrition, high protein for antlers on deer, and it just creates a food plot. It's a natural food plot. It's like coming in here and burning it. It's almost the same thing, except by putting this stuff on the ground, like you see, we're also feeding the microorganisms in the soil. Where if you burn it, it burns all that stuff off, depending on what kind of burn you're doing, a hot, cold, like that. So, but it freshens everything. Now you can see right there, this first pasture was a ½ acre. This second pasture was about 0.78 acres, so 3/4 of an acre. And you can see there's more standing. There's more standing forage. So we didn't get quite the impact, but it was still pretty decent. As we walk down this way, you can see it's still pretty decent. We move them like this, quick, every hour, every 30 minutes, depending on what it calls for, and it changes constantly depending on all that chaos junk. And so we're going to go down here and look at where we moved them into 2 acres, I think. It was around 2 acres. And see if you can see a difference. You should see not as much trampling, maybe a little more eating, that kind of stuff. So we'll see. Okay, so I missed one pasture. We had one more pasture that was about 1.5 or 6 or 7 or something like that. And so just real briefly, this is what it looks like. You can see it had pretty good trampling. But they did leave some standing. Some people might ask why they didn't get up into those trees. Well, we didn't have them stocked high enough. And also there's thorns on those things. But if you had them stocked high enough, they'd get in there. But you're sacrificing condition when you do that. And this is kind of a critical time of year for us to have as best condition as we can get. Now let's go look at the bigger pasture. It's, I don't remember, 2 to 3 acres, somewhere in there. It's bigger than this one that we're looking at. Okay, so we set this up the same as the rest of them. This was our last pasture of the day. It was the biggest of this strip that we did. You can see how they grazed it compared to the others. You can see there's not as much trampling. There's more left standing. So if you look at it in terms of utilization that I already defined, there's not going to be as much utilization. So yesterday while we were doing this, we had them in ½ acres and we were moving them down through here like that. And it started to rain on us, and so we started rushing, trying to get things set up because it was going to rain for a while. And we didn't quite make it where we wanted to, before the bottom fell out of it. And so we ended up kind of having to leave them here for a little bit of a longer, well, really quite a bit, maybe an hour or so instead of 30 minutes, maybe an hour and a half, and then we had to move them. So this is what it did. This is not necessarily what I was wanting to do, but that's fine. I've done this before, and it's not a huge, at least depending on the soil and all the other chaos that goes on, it's not a huge deal. Matter of fact, it tends to promote things like clover and stuff like that. That looks like some frog eggs. It's never good when you have frog eggs in your pasture, but you can see they really impacted it hard. So whenever we got a break in the rain, we were able to come down, and we just kind of had to give them the rest of the pasture. So we went from half acres to probably 5 acres, and that was after lunch. So we gave it to them for 8 hours, and this is the difference. This is where they had a large area, and you can see not a lot of trampling, just moving around, you know, grazing the top, which is all right. Sometimes we want to do that, but right now we don't. You know, they treaded a little bit, but not as much as we did over in the other spots. So that's the trade-off. Bigger pasture, they're not going to tread as much. But this still promotes beneficial growth for whitetail. It promotes more beneficial growth for whitetail than not grazing it. If you just let it sit there, the energy content of the stuff the whitetail are eating, unless you burn it or something like that, the energy content is decreasing. By doing this, our energy content will explode. And energy is the main thing that we're after for all our animals. Our wildlife, our cattle, and our goats.